You die in 20 hours and 20 minutes! Finally, I'll be free of your pain and your misery!
Hi everybody, it's your boy, 2020 Victim David Dunn! Hitting you with a brand new video. I hope you are doing well. Today we're going to be talking about the best films of 2020! Oh, that's right, they all got canceled. Well, that's okay, because if film criticism has taught me anything, it's that anytime you can't do a best of the year video, do a best of the decade video instead. First of all, as per usual, this list is my opinion. You're not going to agree with a lot of these selections. I personally think you're not going to agree with most of these selections. Which leads into my second point. There's been a lot of great movies that have come out this decade. Many of which I couldn't put on this list just due to the sheer space. So if any of these movies are not on the list and you're shocked about it, I'm sorry. I tried to put them on there. I really did. There was just 10 movies that I liked more than all of these and just kind of had higher precedence than these movies. Also, spoiler warning for the movies we're talking about ahead, because you can't talk about the decade without spoilers. That's it. Spoiler warning is done. Disclaimers are done. Let's hop into the best films this decade has had to offer. Starting with number 10. Starting this list off strong, you can't have a best of the decade list without at least one Marvel movie. 22 films released over the course of 11 years. The MCU has basically been the 2010s. The big question I struggled with was which movie to put on this list. Like, what do you put on the best of the decade list? Out of 22 movies, do you go with the social commentary of Black Panther? Do you go with the political undertones of the Captain America trilogy? Do you go with something as wacky, zany, and fun as Thor Ragnarok? But at the end of the day, if I had to pick just one movie that summed up everything that I love about this sprawling cinematic universe, I would pick Avengers Endgame. Because Avengers Endgame just captures everything wonderful, amazing, and captivating about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and crams it into this exciting and emotional 3-hour epic roller coaster of a film. And it would be one thing to just throw all of the Easter eggs, all these characters, and all of these action scenes into a movie and just lazily stitch it together. But this film does an amazing job organically fusing these characters, their motivations, and their personalities fluidly into this story. Avengers Endgame has given me everything I've ever wanted in an Avengers movie. Avengers Endgame has given me everything I'd ever wanted in a Marvel movie. And really, this amazing, epic, blown out of proportion blockbuster is easily one of the most satisfying this decade. Number 9. Now, I'm not the biggest indie fan, I'm not the biggest indie stan, but I do support what a lot of independent filmmakers are doing in that subgenre of film. Not just because a lot of filmmakers get their start in indie films, but every once in a while you find a hidden little gem that feels genuinely unique, compelling, and special from those types of movies. A movie like, say, Moonlight. Moonlight is a coming-of-age drama written and directed by Barry Jenkins that unfolds a child's life in basically 3 chapters. His childhood, his teenage years, and his adulthood years. And it shows how in each of those phases of his life, each choice and each action forms a consequence that shapes him into the person he becomes. Moonlight is basically a life unfolding before us, and the fact that this kid deals with so many tragedies that just kind of breaks him and cracks at him over and over and over again. It turns him into like a resilient little diamond. This is a movie that shows a person's worth is not dictated by the experiences that they come from. Top it all off with a very tender, sincere, and genuinely heartfelt story that really taps into the personal experiences of this kid. And you have one of the most effective, engrossing, emotional narratives ever developed this decade. Number 8. If anybody ever tries to tell you you need a big budget, giant explosions, and heavy CGI to make a movie exciting, show them Whiplash and tell them they're wrong. Whiplash is one of the most tense, anxious, heart-pounding thrillers I've witnessed this decade. And what's amazing about it is that not a single action scene takes place in this movie. There's one fight that happens, but for the most part, this movie is not an action blockbuster. No, if anything, it's about this college drummer that wants to be the next Charlie Parker, but he goes head to head against this music professor that is so abusive, angry, and over the top, he makes J. Jonah Jameson look like a walk in the park. And a big reason why this movie works so well is because of the cast. I mean, Miles Teller was a good actor, I've always known that, but I've never really seen him really break out into really dramatic material. In this movie, he's so sympathetic and so relatable as this kid that is literally drumming his way to his dream. Even if you don't really come from the music world, you've been in his position before to where you feel so passionate about a dream that you're willing to let bones break because of it. And J.K. Simmons does such a brilliant job at playing the driving force of literally whipping this kid into shape. If a music professor could come from hell, I guarantee you it's Terrence Fletcher. Whiplash is one of those movies that just gives you whiplash just from watching it, and it does a great job doing that.
Number 7.
Funny thing about number 7, not only is number 7 my favorite David Fincher film to come out this decade, it's also the movie that got me into film criticism in the first place. The Social Network. Leave it up to David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin to take one of the world's most tone-deaf lizard people and turn it into an engrossing, absorbing, amazing dramatic narrative that kind of translates like a 21st century Shakespearean tragedy. The dialogue alone just feels electric. When you're seeing these characters recite these whippy, snappy lines to each other, it just crackles with its own flavor. It's amazing to listen to. But the real surprise comes from Jesse Eisenberg. Here he plays such a neurotic, socially awkward, one-track minded character that he is so fascinating to watch. Top that all off with very creative cinematography, very tight-knit editing, and a banging soundtrack that stands very well on its own. And you have one of the best dramas ever produced this decade in The Social Network.
Number 6.
Marvel has made the list yet again, though interestingly enough, not only is this movie not part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it is also not in live action. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is a dynamite explosion of pop culture comic book fun that authentically brings together the Spider-Man legacy. Because the characters are cel-shaded and colorized in a way that pops off of the screen like it's popping off of a comic book panel. It feels like you're flipping through the pages of a Spider-Man comic book. But really what makes this movie special outside of its eye-popping visuals is the really forward-thinking and inclusive ideology that anybody can be Spider-Man. Really, this movie features a plethora of fun, amazing, and special spider people. And the fact that it shows that anybody can be Spider-Man, anybody can have great responsibility with great power, that is just an amazing message we need to hear more often. I do struggle with the question of which is my favorite Spider-Man movie. Like, it's neck and neck between Spider-Man 2 and Into the Spider-Verse. I don't know which it is. But the fact that it's even that close, the fact that Spider-Verse is even in the same camp as Spider-Man 2, like that alone is an accomplishment worth celebrating. To know that an animated Spider-Man out there is more faithful to his legacy than some of the live-action counterparts are, I can't tell you how amazing that is.
Number 5.
Now, this decade has had no shortage of amazing war epics. Whether it's the World War II drama Hacksaw Ridge, the Osama bin Laden hunt in Zero Dark 30, or the biopic on Chris Kyle, American Sniper. But if I had to pick the best war film this decade, if I had to pick the movie that made me feel the most, that made me experience the most, that latched me on the most, that really gripped me the most, it is hands down, without a doubt, 1917. 1917 is hands down the most immersive film I've experienced this decade. And a big reason why is because of the filming method director Sam Mendes chose. He and cinematographer Roger Deakins filmed and edited this film in very long takes to where it looks like a single shot. The whole film looks like it was filmed in one take, and doing that in a drama like Birdman is difficult enough on its own. But the fact you have it in a war drama like this, where explosions are going off, gunshots are being fired, people are dying, planes are crashing, and you just have the full terror of war unfolding in front of you. Masterful is the word for this movie. It is masterful in its action, in its drama, in how it captures these characters' emotions and experiences and losses. 1917 is a great movie. It's an engrossing movie. It's an absorbing movie. And if you want to experience what soldiers go through in the front lines, watch 1917.
Number 4.
Some people say that Hollywood is out of original ideas, which, for the most part, with the plethora of remakes, reboots, and sequels coming out today, yeah, it's true for the most part, but I wouldn't say they're completely out of original ideas, especially when movies as fresh, creative, and original come onto the scene as Inception. Inception is just a mind-bending premise that comes from the mind of Christopher Nolan, who's obviously done some very dizzying narratives before, whether it's in Memento, Insomnia, or the Dark Knight trilogy. Inception just takes all of Christopher Nolan's strengths as a filmmaker and just takes it to a whole other level, as its characters explores layers and layers and layers of dreams, one on top of the other. If this movie is nothing else, it is dense with its own ideas and concepts. The visual feats in this movie alone are just totally upside down. And amazingly enough, not a lot of CGI in this movie. Anytime Christopher Nolan can pull off a practical stunt, he absolutely does it. There's one amazing hallway fight in particular where its characters are on the ceiling and the ground and they're fighting and punching and shooting each other, and it was all practically made. Like, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is just fighting in a spinning room. Taking the extra step for sequences like that really brings authenticity to the movie and really breathe its own life in a unique and innovative way. Christopher Nolan has done many amazing movies since Inception has come out, from Interstellar to Tenet, but Inception is genuinely one of those movies that shows what Christopher Nolan can technically and creatively do.
Number 3.
Now, similar to independent films, one of the subgenres I usually don't dip my toe into that much are foreign language films. But one foreign language film that did come my way is the Alfonso Cuarón Spanish drama, Roma. And holy crow, Roma is just an awe-inspiring narrative that really hits you in a very deep and personal and piercing way. Visually, the movie is one of the best looking of the year. Like, hands down, one of the best looking films of the year. Every single shot in this movie, every single sequence, every single picture captured in this movie by Alfonso Cuarón is vibrant, daring, and immediately captures and wraps your attention. You can essentially take any frame of this movie, print it out, and hang it on the wall of a museum. That's how amazing this movie looks. But the story and the acting and everything else surrounding the drama of this film is also done very personally in a very heartfelt manner. There are some scenes in this film that are so emotional, so absorbing, and so gut-wrenching that it feels like it comes from a genuine place. Roma is one of those movies that, like Moonlight, it changes and it challenges your perspective, and it unfolds somebody else's story in front of you that you didn't really know to think about beforehand. But it's done in such a visually dynamic, creative, and gripping way to where it really draws you in visually as much as emotionally.
Number 2.
Coming in at number 2 on this list is this decade's answer to Schindler's List, 12 Years a Slave. This historical drama, directed by Steve McQueen, tells a true story about a free man named Solomon Northup, who is illegally sold into slavery and lives life as a slave for 12 years. This movie is such a tragic and heartbreaking breakdown about a very ugly side of American history people don't want to acknowledge or revisit or know that it exists. But yeah, this, like I said, true story, this actually happened. A lot of the things that you see in this movie are things that actually happened. Even when you get to the closing moments of the movie, even when you see Solomon Northup and you celebrate his victory of escaping slavery, it's not a very victory hurrah moment at all. It's not uplifting in any sense. Because not only as he's walking away do you see these whole swaths, crowds of people that will never escape the lives that they live in. But then Solomon Northup comes home and you're like, oh crap. Yeah, that was 12 years. Life didn't stop. People's lives moved on. You got broken up for 12 years and now you're back and things aren't the same. To know that this is a true story, to know that this man was a real person, that these were real people, and they really did the things that you see in this film, it affects you and disturbs you in a very profound way that doesn't really leave you the same after you've left the theater. Bring the tissues, because you're gonna need a lot of them for this one.
Number 1.
This is it, guys. At long last, we're finally here. This is the best cinematic experience I've had this decade. And I went back and forth several times on whether my number 1 spot should go to Roma, 12 Years a Slave, or this movie. But I've watched this movie several times since it first came out in 2010, and I have to say, Toy Story 3 is just as amazing as the first time I watched it. The animation in and of itself is some of the most colorful, the most crisp, the most clear Pixar has ever put out. The cast, as always, is exceptional. I mean, Tom Hanks and Tim Allen as Woody and Buzz Lightyear, that duo never really gets old. But really, when I look at the most special elements of this movie, when I look at what really makes this movie stand out, not just among animated movies, but even among live action ones, it really does come down to the writing for me. Because this movie came out 10 years after the release of Toy Story 2. I have outgrown that franchise. I thought I was never going to get a Toy Story 3, despite how much I wanted to as a kid. And Pixar could have done the lazy thing, like they could have just kept Andy as a kid and just have the toys pick up where they left off in Toy Story 2, like they did in The Incredibles. But no, instead, they let time pass Andy and the toys by in the same way that time has passed by me and other viewers that were Toy Story fans when we were kids. That really allows this premise to breathe really mature and adult themes in this otherwise really simple kids film. Themes about growing up, going to college, moving out, outgrowing the things you cherish as a kid. Did you cry at that ending? I certainly did. I am a grown man, and I am not ashamed to admit that I've cried at that ending every single time I watched it. Toy Story 3 feels like the last period of the last sentence of the last paragraph of the Toy Story franchise. And even though there was another unnecessary "and" tackled on at the end of it with Toy Story 4, Toy Story 3, to me, is the ending of the Toy Story saga. It is the end of the story of Andy and his toys. Toy Story 3 is an amazing movie. It's an exciting movie. It's emotional, it's absorbing, it's funny, it's sad, it's touching, and it is my pick for the best experience I've had at the movies this decade. Okay guys, that has been the end of my list. Did you agree with my list? Did you disagree? What movies were missing from my list? What is in your favorite films of the decade? Thank you guys for watching. I'm genuinely excited to start a new year with y'all. I'm very much looking forward to watching 2020 die. And as always, I will see you guys on the couch watching Netflix because it's still not safe to go to the theaters.